Welcome from the deep. I am Mike the Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we are going to be talking about the 2022 film Barbarian from writer-director Zach Cregger, who is best known for doing The Whitest Kids You Know, or being one of the whitest kids you know.
Yes, he's a pasty fella.
Yeah.
Said the kettle.
I'm going to point out here, I'm wearing my Trevor shirt today, because I thought it was appropriate for this whole thing. If you don't know anything about Zach Cregger, he was in a sketch comedy group called The Whitest Kids You Know, who's one of the founding members recently passed away, Trevor Moore, who's on my shirt. I have been a fan of Zach and The Whitest Kids You Know for a very long time, for, I don't know, 15 years maybe, something like that.
I mean, however long it takes to collect human hair for a doll.
I told you not to bring that up.
Well, sometimes I've been holding on to this one for a long time, and it's the only time it could ever come up.
So anyway, it's safe to say I am a big fan of Zach, and it was important for me to go support this. A funny little story. I saw this on Disney property, and...
That's so weird.
Yeah, it is so weird.
That's so weird. Because not only because of what the movie is, but because it's called Barbarian, it's clearly a horror movie. Some shit's gonna go down, and it doesn't seem like the setting. I can't. I know you're at Disney World, so it doesn't resonate as much. But I can't imagine walking out of It's a Small World, and then at some point very soon seeing Barbarian playing.
Yeah, well, I saw it at Disney Springs, which is like their shopping downtown Disney area.
Okay, well, that makes a little more sense.
And it was in an AMC theater, so it was technically, I mean, it's not like a Disney-run theater, but it is on Disney property. I will say...
Got my Winnie the Pooh backpack, let's go watch some murder!
Well, it was really weird walking out of the theater after having seen it on Disney, because you watch this movie, and you've watched it, and so you know how you feel toward the end of that movie, and you walk out and you hear Aladdin lo-fi beats and people are eating Mickey bars and stuff. It was really weird.
That's such a weird juxtaposition.
Yes. But either way, it was important for me to support this in theaters because I'm hoping with all the hype this movie has, because I don't know if you've heard, but this movie is kind of doing really well. It was really low budget. It's got a ton of hype behind it.
4 million.
Yeah. And it is done very, very well. And I'm hoping what this is going to allow Zach to do is have a little bit more money next time. I think there's already talks of doing maybe a prequel for this movie and going more into all of that kind of stuff because this movie did so well. I think it was kind of a sleeper hit. Nobody expected it to do as well as it's done. So it did. Okay, so it had 4.5 million for the initial
for the budget
cost. Yeah. And then you said it made how much?
It made 33, I think.
That's ridiculous. So he's definitely going to get more work after this, especially probably doing horror. I know that he's talked a little bit about some of his next projects and one of them not being a horror movie. But I think this is going to lead him to some really cool projects in the future. But if you would like to, go ahead and give us a synopsis on what Barbarian is about, and then we'll jump over to IMDb and see what it has to say about that.
So Barbarian is a non-elevated horror, which thank God, and it is about we won't get into that, but just thank God that was one of my favorite aspects about it. So I just had to say that off the bat. But it is about, basically, there's a lot going on here, and it's a really weird plot structure.
Yes, it is.
And so I guess for the most part there's people that stay at an Airbnb, and some stuff goes down when they go into the basement. But I guess a more generic thing is that there is a house in Detroit, and there's some going on in the basement, and some people pay the consequences for finding out what aforementioned is in said basement.
Yeah. So, yeah, loosely. I think we'll read the synopsis over on IMDb.
I'm trying not to give anything away here.
Well,
that's the thing, is I'm trying not to give anything away.
So I do want to say this is going to be a spoiler-filled review. But also we will tell you when the spoilers are coming up. We'll keep it pretty spoiler-free up until that point. But on IMDb here, Barbarian 2022, rated R, an hour and 42 minutes. It's got a 7.1 out of 10, which is lower than I would have expected. Written and directed by Zach Kreger, starring Bill Skarsgård, Justin Long, Georgina Campbell. Why don't you, and here, we'll do the one-sentence synopsis here. A woman staying in an Airbnb discovers that the house she has rented is not what it seems. That does
not do this movie justice.
No, it really doesn't.
Dude, there is so much going on here.
Well, why don't you go ahead and give me your initial thoughts, because this is a first time watching for you. It's a second time watching for me, so I'm interested to see what you have to say about it. We'll talk about some specifics, then we'll get into spoilers and talk about the ending and give our ratings and stuff like that. So
overall, I loved this movie. I loved it. It is my favorite horror of 2022. I'm going to say that. This dude can direct the ever-loving out of a movie, dude. I mean, and he wrote it too. There were moments in this movie that are so incredibly tense and suspenseful and genuinely scary. Genuinely scary. I do not see horror movies and get scared. It does not happen. And this movie was actually scary. And that was something like I went into this with a very open mind. And I didn't feel one way or the other about it at first. As it went along, like I said, we'll get into specifics. As it goes along, I had a few different emotions about what was going on. The first half is basically a mystery horror. You spend the entire time trying to figure out who's who and what's really going on. And then the plot structure is so unique. This is how you use 4 acts instead of 3, given an hour and 40 minutes. Normally you'll see multiple acts, longer than 3 acts in longer movies, but this is an hour and 40 minutes, and there's 4 acts in here, and they just flow beautifully. I loved this movie. The performances are good, the special effects are good, the lighting is good, the cinematography is good. There are so many good shots in this movie, and every single shot forces you to look at how it's contributing to the scene, because every angle and focal length is contributing to the scene in one way or the other. They didn't miss a goddamn detail in this movie. I loved this movie.
I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised by that.
Are you?
This has, like I said earlier, this has a lot of hype behind it. And
Mike doesn't have a lot of respect for my opinions. So
no, it's not. No, it's not that. It's not that. It's this movie is kind of, I don't know. I've talked to a few different people about this movie, and they either love it or they absolutely hate it. And I knew there's some stuff in here that you were really going to appreciate, like the cinematography and stuff, like you said, because you're right.
Incredible.
The cinematography is one of the best things about this movie. There are moments where he uses
phenomenal.
Where I want to say it's like a 12. His focal length is like at a 12, especially for the POV flashback stuff, the flashback stuff. There's some stuff in the tunnel that's really close up on Justin Long. You're right. The focal length is used not in a way that's self-serving, but it feels important to what they're trying to tell you in the scene. And that is something that you don't get out of a lot of elevated horror. And it's funny that you said that one of your favorite things about this is that it's not an elevated horror. One of Zach's most recent tweets is an article about why horror doesn't need to be elevated to be scary.
Yeah.
And I think this movie
or at all.
Yeah, well, and I think this movie, I have a tendency to love stuff like Mandy, and not that that's necessarily a horror movie, but it's very stylized and art house or elevated, however you want to say it. This movie is like traditional horror movie, and you can really see that Zach really loves old school horror, and he plays on some really some tropes that are really buried within horror a lot. But he's also doing it in a really refreshing way. I agree that the cinematography and stuff is all phenomenal, but I think one of the other greatest things that he does so well in this movie are setups and payoffs, and they're done so subtly.
Yeah.
And he does it so many times, like with the homeless guy, or with I have it written down here, knowing that the cops aren't going to show up, which forces her to go into the basement to look for what's his name. I forgot his name.
Keith. No, that's
Keith.
The first
Yeah,
guy.
it is Keith. It's Keith. But
the first guy.
Yes. Yeah, Bill Skarsgård. But like she knows she's already called the cops because this homeless guy was chasing her. So she knows no cops are coming out there. And so what that does is it forces her to go into the basement, and it's this perfect setup that you don't really think too much about because she's like, this guy is freaking me out and stuff. And then 10 minutes later, she's got this moment where she has to figure out if she's going into the tunnel or not to find Bill Skarsgård and to find Keith. And it's this perfect setup and payoff, and it answers, why the hell would you go into that tunnel after him? You barely know him. But what it is she has to go in there because she's either going to leave him for dead and think about that for the rest of her life, or she's going to go in there because she knows no other help is coming. And it's little stuff like that where he sets all of these little things up and then pays them off in such a big way. And it's also the structure is really weird, like you said, but it's so perfect for this movie, right? It's like,
her going back in twice really made me ask and answer the question: is there enough drugs and alcohol in the world to allow me to abandon somebody that I don't know to that fate? And I think the answer is yeah. I think the answer is yeah, because every time I watched her, I actually have a note where, like, when she first opens the door and she goes, nope.
Yeah.
I went, finally a character that doesn't do the dumbest thing. And just so people can see, this is how I do my notes. Like, every thought is like a different line, right?
Right.
And so it just says, finally a character doesn't do the dumbest thing they can. And then the next line is, never mind. Because then she does go in. But like the whole time I'm like, yeah, it's a fucked up thing to leave somebody down there. But before she goes down there, she's still convinced that he's the bad guy. And this is actually and that's why I had that thought, because I was like, you still think he's going to do something terrible to you, and he's gone now, so now leave. Because that's your mentality right at that point. You don't know what's going on yet. Like, that it just, especially
but the flip side of that, though, is after they spend that night together, is she's thinking, like, and you can tell this from the coffee shop scene where she's looking at the picture that she took of his ID. She's kind of crushing on this dude hard.
Yeah.
One
bottle of wine will change your perception completely.
That, and I love, by the way, about that, I love the shot of the dryer no longer being used and they're sitting there drinking. It's such a subtle way to tell us how much time has passed and stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, anyway, I want to hear your thoughts on the whole Bill Skarsgård thing. Like, let's break this up into different acts and talk about the first act. Because I feel like the first act does such a good job of pulling you in by making it
genius.
It is, right? And before we get into that, I want to, there's a quote here that I wrote down from Zach Krager. What I wanted to do was film a David Fincher film upstairs and a Sam Raimi film downstairs. And I think that is such a perfect way to look at it. So I wanted to have that quote while we talk about this first scene here, or the first act.
Dude, just that mentality alone, though, to have the mentality of, okay, I want the movie to feel this way, but I want portions of the scenes to feel different in a drastic way. And how the do you pull that off? Well, you pull that off by changing the environment entirely And that's what he did. That's what he did. We've got an entirely different environment upstairs and compared to downstairs, and they both lend themselves so well to the elements that he's trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But back to your question about like how I feel about the whole Bill Skarsgård, we'll call it story arc.
Yeah.
We'll call it the story arc, because this could almost actually be broken into like 2 episodes. Although it works, oftentimes it doesn't work well if you say that, and this still works well as a whole piece. It's absolutely genius, because I genuinely did not know if he was the bad guy until, can I say what happens?
No, let's hold off on spoilers for now.
Okay. Until we find out that he's not who we think he is, I thought, literally up to that point, I still thought that. And like when he's trying to get her to go a certain way and trying to get her to go a certain way, like even at that point, I'm like, okay, no, this dude is who I thought he was. And it's like it takes up to the last 30 seconds for me to go, no, oh, holy shit. Like to maintain that level of doubt and that level of mystery through the entirety of 2 acts is pretty goddamn impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The one of the things I think that he did really well in this movie was really kind of take us through Tess's headspace while dealing with this whole situation. And one of the things when he
makes us as uncomfortable as she feels.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that he said, that Zach said, I saw a bunch of interviews and stuff after I watched this. I did not initially think we were going to do a review for this, which is why this review is late, because for several reasons. But it just got released on HBO Max, like I think a few weeks ago, maybe. And I did not initially think we were going to do a review on this. So after I watched this, I went down a rabbit hole of watching different interviews and podcasts and stuff with him. And one of the things he said, that really struck me was that he didn't really know where he was going. So a lot of the times when I don't know how many people care about this, but this is like totally up my alley. A lot of the times when you write something, you'll do a really rough draft, right? And you'll kind of have you don't have everything planned out, but you have everything sort of sketched out a little bit where you need to hit this, and this in order to get this to happen. And in one of the interviews I saw with him, he was talking about how he had written this kind of as, initially it started as kind of an exercise to sort of put himself in the shoes of what a woman would feel like, where this dude is sort of, where basically putting himself in the headspace of Tess in this situation. And he wanted to see how he could get himself to feel and what it would feel like to be in that situation from the non-man's perspective, which is really interesting, right?
So he went to a NAMBLA meeting.
So initially he said the whole thing started kind of as an exercise. And one of the other things he said was that when they do get into that basement, and he has both of them in that basement, he still kind of thought that Bill Skarsgård was gonna be the bad guy.
Interesting.
And so he didn't really know what was going to happen until he had the thing that happens at the end of this first story arc happen. And so for him, it was just as much of a crazy, oh my God, what did I just do, as it is for the audience when you're watching it, because it does genuinely feel like a short story within a longer story, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a red herring is a trope that you see a lot, but I think that this does it in such a different way that it almost feels refreshing in horror, because you see red herrings so much, but you don't then see it by the end of the first act get cut off and then move on so rapidly. And
I feel like refreshing is a good blanket term for how I felt about this movie in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to start, I think, from here on out. I think we would both recommend watching this movie if you're watching this for the spoiler-free part. I would like to start getting into what actually happens in the plot of this movie. So I think we would both recommend this movie. So, spoiler from here on out. Tell me what you thought about once they get down into the tunnel and how that first story arc ends. Because I'm really interested.
So, dude, the tunnels. I don't consider myself to be claustrophobic. Like, I'm not going cave diving anytime soon or anything like that.
Amen to that.
But I don't consider myself a claustrophobic person. Like, I can get on an elevator, fine. I can go down tube water slides, just fine. But the tunnels in this made me so uncomfortable just being in them. And I don't think it was the tunnels in of themselves. I think it's the fact that because you know that if and when something pops up at you in these tunnels, you got nowhere to go.
Yeah, there's one way out.
Yeah. And they did such a good job of the low-key lighting in the tunnels is really, really well done.
Yeah.
It never feels sourcey, but there's not really an explanation for it to exist. Except, well, I guess there is the light coming off the flashlights and everything.
Yeah.
But even then, a lot of the times, like, it'll feel sourcey. And for some reason, it makes sense because they didn't go about trying to light around her. All they lit up was her face and then, like, the immediate area of the wall just, like, right near her arms.
Yeah. There's a great shot of, I think it's when she's using her phone and they expose for the flashlight and not for the tunnel. And it just leaves this big blank black scene with only the door frame and her flashlight. It might be his. Either way,
it's towards the end.
Yeah. So it's just this big blank composition of blackness with them in the center with the flashlight. And it reminded me a lot of like what the recent Dune did with their lighting, because they lit all of their stuff. They used sand screens. They did not use blue or green screens. They used sand screens for that. And what that did was sort of accent how they did all of their natural lighting, because everything was shot outside and actual outside. But it reminded me a lot of how when they're getting off the ship in the new Dune, where everything is exposed for the light, and so what it ends up doing is leaving you with silhouettes. But what it does is it lets your fucking imagination just run wild, especially in those tunnels before we see anything. It's crazy because you're just like, literally anything could be down here. He sets it up in such a way that literally anything could be down there. And the moment that Keith shows back up and he's scared, everything, it's like the whole movie just shifts.
That's the other thing, man. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a paranoid, untrusting jackass, but even when I see him scared, I was still thinking, this is an act. This is an act, and he's gonna pull her down somewhere. Something terrible is gonna happen, and this is gonna be a kidnapping story.
Right.
And then that thing pops up, and it was just, dude, it totally caught me off guard.
Yeah, I mean, and it
completely caught me off guard.
Well, it's brutal too. It's so brutal.
Not as brutal as the last one.
Well, that's true. But I just, that first kill is so brutal, and it's so unexpected, and it happens so fast, and then it just cuts, and you're in a completely different place, a completely different time. Everything's sunny and bright and contrasty again.
I actually had to check HBO Max to make sure they hadn't gone to another movie and just skipped ahead.
Yeah.
It was really, really abrupt.
Yeah. But it works in its favor, because it's
totally.
You get this glimpse of what's down in the tunnel, and what that does is he doesn't show it too much. And so what that does is it allows the next thing where Justin Long comes into the house. It allows him to build this tension when Justin Long is being such a jackass and like measuring the square footage of the cave and being so like blindsided by money.
There's two sides to every story, Mike. There's two sides to every story.
What do you mean?
Well, it's a quote from him when he's being a jackass about the whole.
About the whole thing, right? Well, and I think that's the other genius part about this, right? Is Justin Long's character is an asshole. Like, he is an unlikable dick. And Justin Long's great. I love him too. He's been in so many good things,
He'll always be the kid from Dodgeball to me, but I love him.
Well, I also heavily associate him with Tusk now. Like, that's like one of the things that I think of is some of his best
I don't know
work.
If that's fair to him.
No, I think that's some of his best work, man. I love that movie so much. But you know, his character is such a jackass that it almost feels like he's getting what he deserves when he gets caught down in these tunnels.
100%.
And so when he meets up with Tess, it's like, I don't know. It's almost like, well, okay, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. Tell me what you thought of the whole Justin Long thing. Give me your overall thoughts on that. I'll give you mine and we'll move on.
The whole Justin Long thing, I was really not sure where they were going to go with it. I was like, are they really, really going to make him out to be this innocent guy and like really attack the whole cancel culture thing? Or is he really the sleazebag that he's being made out to be? Which of course we find out he is during he makes that phone call and I'm just like, oh my God, you're so dumb. You're such a dumb person. And then in my head, like at first I'm sitting here going like, what are you doing? And then once you realize like he actually did what he's being accused of, I sat there and I went, no, go ahead, make the phone call. Keep making the phone call. Keep talking. Continue talking on a recorded message. So like he does a really good job of being the asshole.
Yeah, he does.
He's really, really good at that. And he does it he's such a broy asshole in the sense of like, he knows he's in trouble and he's lying with conviction, but you can tell part of him really doesn't think he did anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like that whole, like, she took convincing. It's like, dude, just punch him now. Like, just like, he did such a good job of that.
Yeah.
And that says something. It's kind of like when you hear people talk about Cersei from Game of Thrones and nobody wants her Lena Headey's autograph because they fucking hate Cersei so much. Like, dude, that means they did a good job.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Like, he does a really good job in this. And that's another thing about this movie is the performances are all really good. Even the side characters, like his financial advisor when he's like dealing with him. I feel like that's how someone in a higher up position would deal with that in a professional way, like staying a roundabout way of, you know, I'm not representing you, and then staying calm when the client starts freaking out. Like, everybody does a great job in this movie. Even the person that plays like the main, I guess, antagonist, like, they sell that character so goddamn well. Everything in this movie is so well done. I do think the way everything with Justin Long plays out too, like that whole story arc, plays out phenomenally. I have a couple issues with the ending that we'll get into, but yeah, overall, I think it plays out really well. I like, again, we have this guessing game of, did he do it? Did he not do it? Though you're pretty sure he did do it. You know, are they going to make it out? Like, nothing, there's so much uncertainty in this movie, which lends itself to making you feel uncomfortable and tense the whole time.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things about it is, and especially watching it the second time, I was curious to see what it was going to be like, a second time through, knowing what's coming. And I gotta say, it holds up great on a second watching. Like, fantastic. Nice. Justin Long, I think, generally speaking, he's not, he doesn't play a whole lot of unlikable guys. He tends to play the aw shucks kind of character.
Yeah.
And so I think this is kind of different for him, which is not a bad thing. He does such a good job of playing the dickhead that by the time he falls down in that hole, you're kind of like, yeah, you deserve to be down in that hole.
Yeah. I speaking of like the characters that he plays, I feel like Justin Long was that kid that got too many noogies from the creepy uncle with like personal boundaries issues as a kid. And I feel like that's why he does, like, I've always had this image of him as that. And that's why I think he always plays nerdy so well. And so it is kind of like it was kind of jarring to see him as his character, because you do just kind of want to tussle his hair a little bit whenever you see him on a red carpet.
Well, he is kind of an asshole in Tusk too. If you remember, he's like the podcaster that's kind of a dick.
Oh, yeah, but that's more in like a narcissistic kind of way.
Yeah.
This is like a narcissistic meets mild sociopathy kind of way.
Right, that's fair. I mean, a fun fact about the scene in the bar where he's talking to his friend, that guy that he's talking to, that's Zach. And Zach also, I think, individually.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it is. And he's also the voice on the telephone that Justin Long gets. He's like the male producer on the phone. That's also him. I believe
cool.
I believe the other voice is his wife. I think I could be wrong about that. Anyway, yeah, I think that the reason that, okay, we're gonna get into heavy spoilers here from here on out. The reason that at the end, when Justin Long's character dies, you have gone through this whole thing with him, and you start to feel like, especially when they're in the homeless guy's camp, and he has that whole thing about like, I'm gonna make stuff right, and you feel like there's some progression there. 10, maybe 6 minutes later, he throws Tess off the fucking water tower. Right after he's gone through this whole character development of, I'm gonna make stuff right. I might be a bad person or a good person who has done bad things.
That's where the sociopathy that I was talking about comes in.
And then the second he has a chance to be a dickhead again, he's a dickhead again and thinks only of himself in that moment. But then right after that, he realizes that Tess is still alive, and so he immediately feels bad. And so I think by the time that does she have a name? The creature? Whatever.
Mom?
By the time Baba has wakes up and like grabs his head and forces her thumbs through his head and like rips his head apart. Not only is that such a killer scene, it's brutal as fuck. These special effects are awesome, but it's also this super good payoff of this dude that you kind of hated already. You started to feel for. You get to the moment of his character developing into somebody who that you can feel like, okay, this is actually not a bad guy. He then turns around and does another horrible shit. And by the time that he dies, you are so into the idea of him getting what he deserves that it's this massive release at the end of the movie that you've kind of been waiting for the whole time. And it's such a good payoff. It's that setup and payoff thing that I'm talking about.
It's an emotional roller coaster. It's like there's so many times where you think he's going to get what he deserves, and you're like, yes, no, yes, no. And that happens like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. I definitely,
and since you mentioned the ending is actually the only part of this movie I kind of took any issue with.
Okay.
And it's mostly because Tess goes off the water tower there's so much time between when Tess goes off the water tower and the Baba monster jumps after her that there's no way she would have landed on the monster.
Yeah, I think if that shot was different where she was on the ground and Baba was on top of her, but I still think she could have survived being thrown off the water tower, not having landed on her.
I don't think she would have survived it anyway.
No?
No, I really don't. But the rest of this movie was so good that I was like, you know what? That's fine. You came to a conclusion that at least wraps everything up. And I'm okay with that.
I mean, I think part of it is that, like, you do kind of have to serve some tropes. And you can't throw all the tropes out the window and still have a super satisfying horror movie.
Well, yeah, and let's be honest. When the movie has a creature like this, if you can't suspend some disbelief, maybe the stick is too far up your ass.
Yeah.
Like I feel like when you've got it's kind of like with the whole with the Jason movies. Like, what am I supposed to do? Be like, why was there ever another Jason movie? Because they set him on fire. They cut off his head. It's like, well, yeah, because it's a horror movie with a monster.
Yeah,
like it's already not. You already have to suspend some disbelief to even enjoy watching that. And so it's like I did take issue with that, but at the same time, it wasn't enough to like ruin it for me.
Well, once we find out that she's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and that she's just a big incest monster, you're either
I was talking about test surviving.
No, I know.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, once you find out that she's a big incest monster, you're either in or not, and I feel like the ending, you're either in with that or not, and you have already decided whether you're in or not when you find out kind of her backstory a little bit, right?
You mean the element of an insoster wouldn't throw some people off?
I don't know.
I just really wanted to say insoster, and I'm now going to just call her the insoster of the Barbarian movie.
Well, I mean, there's well, okay. I mean, I don't know. What else do you want to say about the ending here? Because we're running on 40 minutes already. So
well, first of all, I love that I broke you for 5 seconds there. That was enjoyable.
Yeah.
But no. Overall, man, this was a refreshing horror movie. It's a genuinely scary horror movie. It is well written. It is well shot. It is well lit. We didn't even talk about the creepy old serial killer kidnapper.
Yeah. Or the fact that the aspect ratio changes when we go back in time.
Yeah,
there's so many little things throughout this movie. It's hard to touch everything in like a quick review like this, but
yeah, he fucking did everything right.
Yeah,
he did everything right, and
isn't that crazy for somebody who's like, this is his first real horror movie, especially directing. He's written a lot of stuff, obviously, with The Whitest Kids and some other stuff here and there. He also did Miss March with Trevor, which is, I think he may agree with this, kind of blackballed him a little bit because that movie did so poorly. And I've heard both him and Trevor say that they were both kind of ashamed of how that movie came out or how it was perceived. And so I think it just took him a long while to get back to the idea of maybe making a full length again. But dude, he's going super fucking far if he can follow this up with something that is even half as good as this.
Yeah. Well, I was worried that we were going to get another Jordan Peele kind of thing. Like what was his first movie? Get Out? Get Out was the first movie I saw by him, which was a good movie. It wasn't scary, and there were a lot of moments that you could tell were supposed to be really tense and suspenseful, and I didn't get that out of those scenes. And so I was worried that it was going to be kind of, because they're both coming from the comedy world. Like, I didn't know if it was going to be another one of those situations, but like the dude knows horror. And don't get me wrong, Jordan Peele knows horror. It just, to me, it's more fun. It's more of a fun ride usually with like a deeper message. And this was more of a fun ride with a truly scary element to it.
Well, I think that's because Zach, you can tell Zach loves old shitty horror movies. You can just tell by watching this movie that he is as obsessive about horror as, maybe not as obsessive as we are, me specifically. I'm not sure, but you can tell he fucking loves horror. And when somebody genuinely loves horror, they're going to make something that's a little bit more hardcore and a little bit more brutal. Than somebody that, Jordan Peele, he makes great movies, but they're not my style necessarily. Yeah. But they are great movies, but they're not traditional horror kind of in the same way that this is. Yeah. He makes more elevated horror or whatever you want to call it. This is straight up.
I don't mean that in a negative way.
No, I know, not at all. But this is a straight up brutal horror movie, and like it's a straight up monster
Barbarian.
movie. Yeah, it's a monster movie, And
yes, it's called Barbarian.
Yeah.
If you're going to watch a movie that you know is a horror movie and it's called Barbarian, some sick, twisted shit is gonna go down.
Yeah.
And this is a sick, twisted horror movie, but it's done in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. And there's a lot of other stuff that we didn't talk about. Like I said, there's tons of stuff in this movie that I noticed watching it a second time, and I will buy this on Blu-ray or probably 4K actually.
100%.
And I will watch it a
4K.
third time, and I will notice stuff again that I didn't notice in the first two watchings. That's how strong this is.
Now, do you think you'll buy it in 4K because there's a noticeable difference between 4K and Blu-ray?
No, to be honest, the music and sound, I know, but the music and sound in this is so good. I want the higher quality sound from a 4K disc rather than a Blu-ray for this movie.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, it really is.
Part of it,
dude. One of the opening shots where they're outside of the window and all of the sound, the like type shit as they're dollying in, and then once they go through the window, which is in itself is super fucking cool. All of it stops and it's super quiet and you can hear all the rain stuff. There's other shots like when she walks through the door, all of the tension building sounds and all, dude, it's just phenomenal from top to bottom. The cinematography is great. The fact that they're changing focal lengths so much, aspect ratios, even, all of it is amazing. And like you said, we didn't even really touch on the serial killer or the serial. I don't even know if we can say that word on YouTube. What?
Serial arpist?
Sure.
Arpist?
Grapist.
There.
Grapist. Why not?
Grapist, yes.
Because that's, of course.
The serial grapist, because we are in an episode of How I Met Your Mother.
No, the grapist is from The Whitest Kids.
Oh, is it? Oh.
I'm gonna tie you to the radiator and grape you in the mouth. So we didn't even really touch on the serial grapist part. And that's the stuff I think that there are rumors going around right now about the prequel. That is kind of what that would be about and how Barbarian came to be.
Dude, that's going to be a fucked up movie.
Yeah, I mean
that's going to be fucked up.
That's one of those things. I would have said before this last month that main releases are never going to be that hardcore, but then Terrifier 2 blew everything out of the water and maybe has changed some perceptions about how hardcore a horror movie can be and still be in theaters and stuff.
Well, I'm gonna go watch that for a palate cleanser.
Yeah, I mean that's not even. I won't even go into my Terrifier thing. All right, well, give me your closing thoughts and your rating on Barbarian from 2022.
Dude, it's a phenomenal movie. Zach Kreger came out of the fucking gate like Pixar with Toy Story with this one. I mean, this is you go from comedy to this, and this is what you fucking came out with. Like, bravo, dude. Like, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. I will be buying this on 4K, and then enjoying the absolute ever-loving hell out of it, and then buying the Steelbook and whatever slipcase they come out with. And whatever other crap they come out with, because I loved this movie. This is my favorite horror movie of 2022. And if I were to go out on a limb, this is probably at the top of my list of favorite horror movies of the last couple years.
Rating?
I'm going to, only because of my issues with the ending, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Okay. For me, yeah, this is exactly how you make a modern, scary horror movie. So many times, directors have this need to want to jump scare you, and loud equals scary and shit like that.
Yeah.
This movie it takes so many different directions, and you don't really know how it's all going to come together, but by the end, it feels like one really cohesive piece, and it's so well written, and the cinematography is so goddamn strong. Every single scene is beautiful. The lighting is fantastic. The fact that they're changing aspect ratios to let you know what time period they're in. The use of color is something we didn't even really touch on. There, the reds and the oranges and the greens in this movie, and even some of the blues, and the fact that, like we touched on earlier, the house upstairs feels like a completely different place than it does downstairs. And when we're downstairs, it's fucking crazy. And when we're upstairs, there's some sense of normalcy. And he just plays on those two things so well, and the tension building is done so perfectly with the way that it's written out. Dude, honestly, I knew I was gonna kind of like this because I know a lot about Zach. I've watched them on Twitch. I've even donated to the Whitest Kids Mars movie. I knew I was gonna like this. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. And so for me, this is also a 9 out of 10. I think the ending leaves some stuff to be desired, but other than that, I think it's damn near perfect. So, yeah. So let us know what you guys thought down in the comments about this movie. I know that this movie's kind of divisive. If you like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we got a lot more content like this on the channel. We're so close to 100 subs. So if you hit that subscribe button, help us get there. That would be super cool. Hit our first milestone on this channel. That would be awesome. Thank you to all of the new subs that have been coming in recently. We really appreciate it. And we will see you guys next time from the deep. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.